Thank you. Good to meet you all. Jose Plehn. In just a full disclosure, I wear three hats. So I'm founder CEO of BrightQuery, or BQ as we like to call it. BQ is a data company. We're often compared to Dun & Bradstreet, Experian, Equifax, companies of that sort. I'm also founder of opendata.org. It's a brand new entity that hopefully that I'll be talking about and for you to visit. And I'm also a board member of the AI Alliance and co-executive director. The AI Alliance is a nonprofit trade association and research lab that's, in fact, we have a booth on this floor. So I would strongly encourage you to go and talk to the folks there. It's free to join, and part of this work is as a member of the AI Alliance. So I'm going to give you some background on BQ in general and a lot of work we do with government agencies, because that actually is relevant to the open data sets that I'll be talking about. And basically we're introducing what we believe is the world's largest open entity graph. And by entities, as we will learn, I'm talking about companies, people, places of business, addresses, concepts of that sort. But what we're hoping is that this be the launching pad for what we're calling the Open Data Consortium, which is for others to contribute entities that they like to track and care about and piece it all together, which we'll be talking about. So just by way of background, I'm an economist by training. I'm not an engineer. So please, take that into account if you ask any very deep technical questions. But I was a professor. I was an economics professor, then eventually I was an accounting professor at Cal, very nearby at Berkeley, and then I was a finance professor at UCLA. I did one company, and now this is my second one, BrightQuery. So BrightQuery, we serve highly regulated industries. So we serve US government agencies, we serve Wall Street, we serve banks, insurance companies, legal folks, and so on. Whenever there's mission critical data at stake for some kind of decision, whether it's a compliance decision, a financial decision, investment decision, lending decision, our data often feeds into that decision. We started off covering just the United States. And that is still our core advantage and core competency, but we do not have global coverage. And this will be relevant as we talk later on about the data sets that we are open sourcing for you all to benefit from. We have what I like to call is a symbiotic relationship with government agencies. So we have contracts with them, we work with them, and we often clean and analyze their data and build AI systems on top of it. And then all that work that goes into working with these agencies, then you all can benefit from in terms of the data that we make available. Very often we get asked this, especially at conferences and at events. We're like, well, how come I haven't heard of you guys at BrightQuery? So for those of you old enough to remember when Intel was inside laptops and so on, we're kind of often described as the Intel Inside or the NVIDIA Inside. So we power a variety of platforms. We power platforms that service Wall Street, power platforms that service banking, insurance companies, and so on. Through our platform clients, we service tens of millions of end users. And you've probably all been touched to some degree or another by data that we provide through platforms that you use directly or indirectly. But yeah, we're kind of deep inside the data bowels of systems. Having said that, so at some point next year, we are going to start servicing end users, where we'll have a variety of user interfaces, APIs, MCP servers, and such, so that anyone who wants to build directly off of our data, can do so rather than working through a partner. Core of what we do is tracking entities, and it starts often with legal entities, and then let's see if it goes back on. Okay, good. So core of what we do is track legal entities, and beyond that, other entity types that we'll be talking about. We call them organizations, companies, call them people, addresses, locations, and such. But the tracking of legal entities and corporate structures is surprisingly complex. because companies can have multiple children and grandchildren and subsidiaries and holding companies, have people related to them. Maybe it's related to an entity or a place and so on. They might have one office, they might have multiple offices. They could have PO boxes. They could try to hide their activities, or they could be out in the open. And it's our job at BrightQuery to kind of track it all down. And then you can benefit from that with this entity graph. I should point out kind of one of the things that we're famous for is the financial information that we sell. So a lot of folks who come to BrightQuery and license our data, our premium data, it's because in all this tracking that we do of the economy, we collect tax and financial information on every business in the world. So every company, there's about 300 million companies in the world, we provide financial information on them all. But again, Wall Street and others rely on today. If there are any bankers in the audience, but we do also have a deep partnership with ProSite. ProSite, in case you're not familiar with it, is the result of a merger between BAI and the RMA. BAI represents the banking industry. The largest banks are all members, and RMA is the Risk Management Association. That's the trade association that represents risk professionals. I'm going to talk briefly about some government work that we do, because again, that will hopefully give you some confidence in the data that we are open sourcing, and it will give you a better understanding of where it comes from. But some of the work that we have through a variety of contracts is we're building out what's called the National Secure Data Service for the US government and its allies. It's basically a centralized system that kind of tracks, quantifies, and centralizes data across all levels of government in one platform. It's actually the first time in history, United States history, that such a system has been developed. And we're building it. Here's a very little snapshot of kind of what it entails. But long story short, it entails coordination across many, many agencies. And with government, it's difficult to get coordination. I should also point out that BrightQuery, the company, and the AI Alliance, which I help represent, and BrightQuery is a member of, again, I'm on the board of directors. We do have, to be very open and transparent, a Western view of the world. So we are contributing to America's AI Action Plan and its allies. So a lot of the work we do is in helping support the United States and its allies establish leadership globally in terms of open source data and AI technologies. And we have a lot of work in support of that through our collaboration with these agencies. A lot of the work we do, and this entity graph that I've been talking about, also the way it benefits government and those of us who reside in the United States and its allies, revolves around AI readiness. So a lot of the work is trying to make the information collected by agencies AI ready. And any of you interested in some of this work, be happy to discuss in more detail. Last thing I will mention about the government work, and again, this is relevant to the entity graph because this entity graph that we're publishing, we've already been using it in the work that we do with government. And so it's sort of battle tested. It's also been battle tested on Wall Street and in a banking context. But one of the things we're doing is we're building a chatbot for the US government and its allies. And that is going to be available for the general public to use and consume. And this is a system whereby you can query anything about the United States, and it will provide a factual answer with a certain level of confidence. And so we have a scoring system that kind of will tell you how confident we are in the answer being provided by the system. Having said that, the system does not rely on the open web. It relies on data that have been approved and trusted by the member government agencies. Here are just some examples of what this looks like. And built into this, basically, this graph that we're talking about powers this system, okay? So every time you ask a question to the system about a country or a company or a person or an address or something like that, it's drawing from this open entity graph, okay? Yeah. So here are just some examples. This has not been released to the public yet. We expect it will be released next summer. Yes, this government AI system. So now to jump to what I believe you're all here for, although I kind of hopefully built a little bit of suspense. So opendata.org, what are we trying to do? The tagline that we like to use, there we go. The tagline we're trying to use is we're trying to make the world more factual, one data set at a time. So I'm a firm believer that for us to build trust in AI systems, we need to trust in the information that they return back to us. And a core tenet to achieve that outcome is to have high quality entity resolution. And what do I mean by an entity? I'll go into details, but just to give you a preview, an entity to us and to me could mean a company, could be a human, could be an address, could be a place of business, could be a relationship between these things, and extensions thereof. It could be universities, it could be academic publications, it could be a financial security, it could be a ship that's out at sea, it could be an island, it could be the people on that island. All of these so-called things are entities. They all deserve a unique ID. They all deserve to be tracked and monitored, and we must all agree as to what this ID is for this particular person, company, place, address, what have you, okay? Now again, confidentiality, privacy, and so on is important. We're not trying to let the world know everything about you as an individual. That is not the objective over here. The objective over here is to help ensure that AI systems are factual, and when they're referring to you as a human, or the company you work for, or some address you're associated with, that is done with accuracy and critically provenance, so we know where this came from, okay? So I'm sure you're all familiar with open data, but had one of our researchers kind of find some good, reliable definition, and here is one. Open data and content can be freely used, modified, and shared by anyone for any purpose. That seems like a very reasonable definition to me. We're all, I think, in general, proponents of open source and open data, and certainly that is at the heart of a mission of the AI Alliance, and myself personally, and opendata.org. The US has led the way in some respects. The EU has also led the way in other respects, and Asia, various countries in Asia are making way. Others in Asia are not. And there is inherent significant economic value associated with this, with enhanced open data. Here are just some, little examples of that, but hopefully you all agree that it's a good thing for there to be more open data, and there is economic value associated with it. So, what is this open entity graph? First of all, we are licensing it under Creative Commons 0. That's the most permissive license there is. And the way to think about it is as building blocks. The most fundamental building block is a global directory of every company in the world. There's about 300 million of them. It's a global directory of every place of business in the world. There's about 500 million of them. It's a global directory of every address in use in the world. A global directory of every human, every adult, working adult, associated with a company in the world. There's about 1.25 billion. So it's identifying them all, and not just identifying them and IDing them, but also the relationships between them. So I, Jose Plehn, reside in California. I'm associated with BrightQuery. BrightQuery has various offices and legal entities around the world. This is who they are, and such. And so we can all agree on what those are and the relationships between them. By providing this directory, we can all have a golden source of truth. And as I mentioned, the way we're sourcing this information is through deep partnerships and work with government agencies. Okay? We have what we call the legal view and the business view, which I'll get into in a bit more detail. The legal view is basically the legal regulatory filing perspective. The business view is what you would see in the open web, public profiles on LinkedIn, corporate websites, news articles, and such. Some people trust legal filings more. Some people trust the open web more. We make both of them available to you, okay? Now, because these are, in many respects, sort of nodes and edges between the nodes, at heart, this is a graph. I believe it's the largest graph in the world of entities. I don't know this for a fact, but My instinct is it probably is. We're working very closely with all the major tech companies that track this kind of information. Google, Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, Neo4j, and all the various providers out there. And as far as we know, this is the largest such graph the world has ever seen. And conceptually, the way I want you to think about it is as follows. Think of what Google did. What did Google do? It understood the indexing and linkages between all websites on the planet, at least the major ones, the ones that were being cited the most, right? Collected basic metadata about them, how they link to each other, and then it ranked them with this page rank system so that when you run a query, it would find the websites that are most relevant to that query. The idea here is the same, but instead of linking websites and linking text and information on those websites, which is what LLMs and search engines do, instead this is at a more fundamental level, at the atomic level, entities. And if you think about it, us as humans, when we consume information, generally speaking, it's information about what that we care about. At most fundamental level, it's information about companies and people, I believe. Now, there are other related things, obviously, that we track, but at its core, those are the two building blocks of humanity, I think. And so all the world's information, ideally, through this effort, will be linked to those two concepts. Okay? Now, we do not know everything. And it's probably a good idea that we don't know everything. But if you look at the collective knowledge and wisdom of the world, collectively, we all know everything. So part of the objective here is to build out what we're calling the Open Data Consortium, which is the opportunity for other companies or individuals to contribute data to this open data set. And there are various ways of contributing. One way is correcting errors. These errors happen. Anyone who's done data cleaning knows that. Even the most high-quality data set from the most secure bank in the world will have errors. And those errors cost. But that's part of the cost of doing business. So we put a lot of work in curating our data. So do the government agencies we work with. But we're not perfect. So part of the vision is, and part of the benefit to us all in open sourcing this, is to have some kind of crowdsourcing mechanism whereby the general population can help curate and fix errors that they know to be false. That's one objective. Another objective of the Open Data Consortium is for you to contribute entities. Now, I talked about before, well, we're tracking these so-called 5 pillars of the economy, which I'll show a visual, nice pretty visual about that. Companies, people, legal entities, and such. But there are other entity concepts that you might care about in your line of work, or in your company, or in your industry. We've already been approached by academics who want to track publications in this graph. We've been approached by universities. We've been approached by construction companies that want to track physical assets around the world and link them to this graph. Also, import-export banks who want to track shipping. Environmentalists. The other day I was presenting about this, actually in Oakland as well, and environmental lawyers said they wanted to help track environmental assets and link it all to this information. I think it's wonderful. I hope this helps solve at least a piece of a climate change problem. I mean, often starts by tracking things, right? If you can't track them, how can you monitor progress? So that's the vision behind the Open Data Consortium, to have folks contribute entity concepts that they care about, but critically, not just upload some data set, because there's a bunch of open data sets out there, Hugging Face is full of them. I'm sure you've seen a bunch of them. No, for this to be useful, they all have to be linked. This is a graph, okay? So any data set that you have about some that involves companies, people, ships, beaches. I live in Huntington Beach, California, one of the most beautiful places, right by the beach. I love it. I care a lot about that beach. My kids, we help clean it up once in a while, Things like that should be tracked and be part of this entity graph. So once we have this, imagine a world in which every time you run a question, you run a query, a prompt of some system, AI system, that is, imagine it was grounded in the truth of these entities, okay? That, to me, would be ideal. So the 5 pillars of the economy are the building blocks of this graph. Again, this isn't it. This is the beginning, and there will never be an end, because I think this will be expanded upon, probably, hopefully beyond my lifetime. But these 5 things, I think, are the most fundamental aspects, at least from an economics standpoint, and I am an economist, I apologize, but at least that's what I care about. And that's what I think most businesses care about, these concepts. Organizations, that's a company. Legal entities, specific LLCs and corporations. People, of course. Locations, aka places of business, and then addresses. Now, as I mentioned, we track both what we call the legal view and the business view. All right? Because some people trust regulatory and filings information and only those. And some people trust the open web. Well, both sets of information are available in this system. And here I'll give some kind of examples as to what exactly do we mean. By the way, this is critical. All addresses are geocoded already. So you will get lat long. And we put a lot of work on that. In fact, most of the work we do is in cleanup. And cleanup of what? Company names, people names, websites, and addresses. And addresses are very painful to clean. If anyone's been involved in that, hats off. Brutal work, especially globally. Imagine having to standardize addresses in Palestine. Imagine having to standardize addresses on the British Virgin Islands, or mainland China, or Hong Kong, or Indonesia, and doing it all in a standardized global way. No one had done this before in an open source fashion. We're doing so. So when I say the legal view, I mean something like this. This is an example of just a little chunk of a graph. All right? We have companies, we have people, we have entities, they all relate to each other in some form or another. So the legal view is kind of that official view that bankers and compliance officers and lawyers would care about. The business view is what you might see from corporate websites, public LinkedIn profiles, news articles and such. Some folks care about that as well. So that will be captured by this graph. That is captured by this graph. Now, we're obviously not the first to come up with an entity graph. We're not the first to come up with entity concepts. There are plenty of them out there. There's a company called SafeGraph that invented the place key. There's the GERS ID from the Overture Maps Foundation of a Linux Foundation. There's OpenFiggy from Bloomberg having to do with financial securities. There's LEIs from the Glyph Foundation having to do with legal entities. On and on and on and on. That's wonderful. All of these entity concepts should be brought into this graph. And if there's some entity concepts that you're familiar with in some country, in some vertical, in some industry, please bring them in. But keep in mind, we want this to be CC0, Creative Commons open. How does this help? Well, obviously it helps in many ways, but this is an AI conference after all. So a core way is with entity resolution in the context of prompts and the responses. So whenever you get a chunk of text from an AI system, imagine getting a chunk of text and every entity in that text has been identified with a certain degree of accuracy. If there's the string Apple, you know, okay, that's Apple, ticker AAPL, website apple.com, based in Cupertino, California, founded in 1970, whatever it is, et cetera, et cetera. So in an ideal world, every entity, company, person, address, et cetera, referred to in a document or a chunk of text has a unique ID associated with it. That would include brands, by the way. I didn't mention brands, but that's another complexity with companies. They don't just have subsidiaries, they also have brands. So if we think about the use cases of this, hopefully I've convinced you that this is useful, and hopefully you will all be able to benefit from it, but critically, hopefully, contribute to it in your own fashion and spread the word. The world that my company lives in is a world listed via these verticals of entity resolution, master data management, Wall Street, compliance checks, credit, sales and marketing, These are fairly fundamental, verticals, all of which rely on foundational business, people, address type data. I should mention that one of the key partners in this effort, it was in one of the slides, but I'll mention it also in another slide, is Senzing. If you haven't heard of them, I strongly urge you to check them out, senzing.com. And Senzing is one of the leaders in entity resolution. You can learn more about the various fields and such that we have available. And to encourage you all to make contributions, you will be rewarded, okay? We're setting up a system of give to get, but if you add data to it, you will get data back, okay? Premium data from my company, BrightQuery, and some services from other Alliance members. I'm a believer in rewarding those who do good, and this is one way we can do it, by providing you with free additional data that you can use, okay? Eventually, we'll see, hopefully there will be a plethora of services and benefits available to this. Here are some of the AI Alliance members that are active in this effort. And let me summarize over here, and then I think we'll have time for hopefully 1 or 2 questions. So we are publishing this in a variety of formats. If there's a format that you would like to see, let us know, please. But we're going to publish it also in the Senzing format. We're going to have APIs, also MCP server, so you can obtain and query this information via natural language. We are first releasing US the end of this year, and then summer next year we will release global. I'm happy to report that China data will be included. It's been a lot of work to be able to include China, but we will include it. How to get involved? I strongly urge you all to join the AI Alliance. We have a booth out there. There should be Dave or Tim or both of them there on this floor. It's free to join. There's a nonprofit research lab aspect to it, and there's also a trade association aspect to it. The nonprofit is free, the trade association is not. It cannot be free, in fact, by law. So I urge you to go over. And again, please do contribute. I do believe in the power of crowdsourcing. And again, hopefully you can join us on this journey to make the world more factual, one data set at a time. So thank you all. Hopefully we have time for a question or 2. Yeah.
So next we'll have time for a few questions. So just raise your hand and I'll come and bring the mic to you.
Okay. One question. Do you see it related to semantic web ideas? And are there formats what initially supposed to do exactly such entity databases?
That's exactly right. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, in many ways, that was the origin of this. Absolutely. And I should have mentioned it. I apologize. But absolutely. Absolutely, yes.
My first thought was like, wow, this is scary. You've probably been asked this question like so many times, and I just wanted your comment on it. If this information gets into the hands of the bad actors, bad governments, even marketers, they're going to be marketing to my children very easily, all of that, CIA, whatever. Would you comment on that?
Yes, absolutely. So in fact, it's the privacy protections of people that were always our number one concern. And we've put a lot of thought and received a lot of legal advice around the proper way to do this. So first off, when it comes to the people data, no person's address is being divulged. Okay? So the people's privacy, at least the way it's understood by various laws around the world, are being maintained. The objective over here is for there to be an ID. Now let's keep in mind, ad systems already have IDs for us all, right? There's nothing we can do about that. What the main objective over here is to make sure that any information out there that's being claimed pertains to you is accurate and true. That is the main objective. But we're not going to help marketers target us. That is certainly not the objective over here. And there will not be contact information built into this open data set. So we're not going to be divulging your phone number or your email and such, even though we have it. That will not be divulged. Yes. So I hope that makes you feel better. A little bit. One step at a time.
Yeah. Hi, Jose. A quick question about the size of the graphs that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So are you able to share roughly, like, in terms of rows or records, how big these things get?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's about 300 million companies globally, about 500 million locations or places of business globally, and a little over 1 billion people.
And this is before entity resolution, right?
Sorry?
This is before entity resolution is done. So once you deduplicate certain things.
Oh,
you
no,
can-
this is post-deduplication. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, of course, the relationships between them all, the edges, and that's, of course, I don't know, trillions. Yeah.
I think I saw a couple of people at the front, so one here, and then,
And there's a lady also in the back there.
okay, so I'll go here and then here. Okay.
First, in response to this gentleman's question, I think the bad actors already have access to public data. In fact, they're actively curating non-public data. So if you've ever been potential target to pig slaughtering, you know what I'm talking about. But I honestly believe that a single version of truth, and most importantly, providence, is the only weapon we have against AI slop and fake, fill-in-the-blank generation.
Thank you. Here.
No,
Agree.
but having said that,
Mhm.
my biggest worry is that the people capable of maintaining that truth through crowdsourcing, will they have the wherewithal? Because the real power from these databases, from what I can tell, are the edges that you can construct with absolute causality, which only happens through build. So, for example, like Wikipedia, these pages are kept true because somebody is an absolute nerd about that page. They love that topic with all their heart.
Mhm.
This involves many connections that people are going to try to introduce edges. How are you going to enforce that schema so artificial edges that shouldn't be there, and this is the one bad actor, can really skew toward the results and the replies that come up? What's going to be your safeguards against such things?
Great question. So first of all, we are actually working with the Wikimedia Foundation. All this is being linked to Wikidata and Wikipedia articles and all of that. Very actively involved in the development of this project. That's one thing worth mentioning. The other thing is, at least when it comes to these fundamental entity types, that's BrightQuery's business. That's what we do. We day in, day out, we validate, cross-reference, and check data provenance and sources and methods having to do with companies, people, places, legal entities, etc. So as far as the fundamental building blocks of society are concerned, that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be cleaning that up because we're already doing it anyways. And that's part of our business model. That's part of our job. Having said that, there will be areas that will be introduced that we're not experts in. So to use your analogy, we're nerds, experts in these 5 pillars of the economy. But we're not nerds or experts in the other entity types. And that's where the AI Alliance will come in. We're setting up a governance structure, kind of like Wikimedia Foundation has done, and with our guidance in having teams of experts and companies that do have expertise in areas and having a series of controls. Having said that, it hasn't all been figured out. But if you are interested and are passionate about this, we strongly encourage you to get involved. Yes. I think it was a lady, right?
One final question. We need to prepare the next speaker.
Okay.
Thank you for talking about this. It's really interesting. Something for me and my company that's been a problem is data staleness. So like, for example, ZoomInfo is another third-party data company where we can get entity information. But for example, I leave my current company, I go somewhere else. How long does it take for that new node to appear in this solution?
Yeah, great question. So we update the data weekly, fundamentally. Having said that, it's not practical to publish huge bulk data sets on a weekly basis. So bulk data sets, will be published on a quarterly basis, but there will be APIs available that have the real-time, well, quasi-real-time updates available to them. So we encourage folks to download the bulk data sets and do entity resolution and so on, but then when you want more current information, to use the APIs. Yeah. I think the next presenter had to,
Yes. So
yes,
thank
but
you so
I'll
much.
be around, so happy to talk.
So thank you so much for your talk. And yeah, we'll have a